Just had a few thoughts on the whole NBA gambling scandal that's come out here in the last couple of days. To those who aren't super tuned into sports, and I won't even consider myself as tuned in as I used to be, and this is part of the reason. This whole gambling thing going on with Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier, and I think Damon Jones, where there was some illegal poker game manipulation and some manipulating the over under lines and all that kind of stuff. And this whole big investigation's been coming out, and these guys have been put on indefinite leave. This goes into a bigger picture about what sports really means. And you're wondering where I'm coming at with this, because this is a channel more about family and marriage and the nuclear family. But sports has a big context to play in this. And it's really shameful how sports, really, especially in the last 15 to 20 years, has veered further and further away from elements that really have sound Christian fundamentals and sound family fundamentals, and it's gotten more and more into the money, and especially the gambling side of things. And it's just really sad and heartbreaking. Now, to be clear, I'm not naive. I know that gambling, crooked referees, sportsbook manipulation, I mean, this has been going on for, who knows, decades, maybe 100 plus years in sports. But at least, I mean, before the advent of legalized sports gambling, especially nowadays within the last decade, there used to at least be an air that there was I don't want to say true, because there's always a level of corruption, but some element of true competition and camaraderie and an element of sportsmanship that really set an example for the greater culture. I mean, let's just take the word sportsmanship, for example. When we think of, hey, being gracious in defeat and congratulating your opponents, but still being competitive. I mean, these are philosophies that go in other areas besides sports, business and social dealings and all these different things. But what do we call that? When you're gracious in defeat and you shake your hands, whether you win, lose, and all that what do we call that? We call it sportsmanship. So there's a greater cultural value in sports when done appropriately. And what's happened is the further that we get away from the purity of sports and we just make it all about the money, more and more about the money, and millions and billions of dollars exchange hands, players are getting paid more and more, coaches getting paid more and more, the integrity element, which might have been there in a semblance, is faded away rapidly, again, in the last 10, maybe 15, 20 years, to where it's really become more and more of an illusion. And I speak for myself. I've become less focused and intent on sports. I know there are other factors too. I've got a family. I'm older. I can't sit here and watch every single college basketball game and every baseball game during the season like I used to, because I just don't have the time. I'm busier. But even now, I'm just generally less interested, because you're starting to see more and more how manipulative sports is and how much it seems to aim and gear more towards, for lack of a better term, the degenerates. Every time you turn on an NFL game or an NBA game, it's like every 5 seconds I see that annoying Kevin Hart commercial. Hey, use DraftKings. This game was sponsored by DraftKings. And let me just say this on the side. Kevin Hart annoys the crap out of me. I don't know how he got as famous as he did, unless he's a plant or he's got some dirt on some executives or something. I don't know. That's a whole different topic for another day. But the point is, how can you take any of this stuff even remotely seriously, that it's about the love of the game and it's about the camaraderie and the sportsmanship by the game, when every 5 to 10 minutes you see sponsored by DraftKings, sponsored by FanDuel, and all this kind of stuff? At least before, it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but now it's just becoming blatant that this is becoming more and more like WWF, WWE wrestling. You're watching a basketball game, and the load management thing has been around for a while, but now it's just getting ridiculous to the point where even these multi-millionaires, some of these guys are making tens of millions of dollars a year, 40, 50, 60 million dollars a year, and they don't even take the game remotely seriously. They don't even try to be relatable at this point. I'm just going to take this Tuesday night game against the Timberwolves off because I don't feel like playing tonight. Not because I have a legitimate injury, broken leg, broken wrist, anything like that. No, we're just not going to play against the Hornets tonight because I just don't feel like it. And it's not even thinly veiled anymore. You can tell that guys just don't care, and these networks, these corporations, they just don't care because there's going to be some degenerate gambler out there that's looking at the over-under of this game and how many points this player scores and all that kind of stuff. And there's just always going to be the shadiness and corruptness behind it that's just going to continue to fester and permeate. And the thing I'm trying to point out is that, like, they're not even trying to say that there's a sense of purity. We see it more and more in college football, college basketball, etc., with all these NIL deals. And I know that even long ago, they were handing brown paper bags of money to players at, Ohio State and Alabama. You know that stuff was going on. But there was some semblance that you could escape a little bit. And there was the slightest bit of integrity that this person is playing for the name on the front of the jersey and on the back of the jersey. There was a little bit of that. And now that illusion has pretty much all but disappeared. There's less of that kid-like, childlike enjoyment. Again, the sportsmanship is gone. The camaraderie is gone. The love of the game has greatly diminished. And really, who can blame these guys? They think they're invincible. They think that nothing's going to happen to them. And they just dig into this whole love of money thing. Players demanding trades every 5 minutes, demanding new deals every 5 minutes, and just becoming less and less relatable. And what really makes me sick is when some of these players, some of these athletes, coaches try to make themselves more relatable, which is why it really disgusts me when they try so hard to be political activists and social activists, and I want to relate more to the common man. Like, no, you don't relate. You make $57 million a year to put an orange ball in a hoop or to catch touchdown passes. You're not relatable to me, and that's fine. That's okay. Like, just admit it. Stop leaning into something that doesn't make sense. But I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here. Bring it back to the original thing. What does this mean with this whole gambling story? I think we're seeing firsthand the crumbling and elimination of sports role modeling and emulating behavior that we should have in a greater society. The more that social topics and politics seeps into what was originally an escape, and that's what sports is. It's an entertainment, it's an escape, but the more all this stuff creeps into it, you can see more and more people getting turned off by it. And that doesn't bode well for the greater culture. Because just growing up through my life, I've looked at sports as something to where, man, if real life was like this, if we worked with this kind of true sense of camaraderie that you see in football and basketball and baseball, if we had that in a greater society, man, things would be a lot better. Just using football, for example, you got 11 guys, and I'm just talking one side of the ball, 11 guys on offense. Our goal here is to score as many points as possible. A bunch of guys, there's 11 of them, different backgrounds, different ages, different heights, weights, athletic abilities, different roles. They went to different colleges. They grew up with different upbringings, different races, all this stuff combined. And we have one big goal here. We're going to get a touchdown. It's a beautiful thing. Like, can you imagine if, I'm just saying this as a Christian, as a believer. Can you imagine if Christians, even though we all have different backgrounds, different ages, different races, all that kind of stuff, but if we were all unified towards bringing people closer to Christ and bringing people closer to the Word of God, man, can you imagine how powerful we would be? And football and certain sports, when they're pure or close to pure as possible, they really exemplify those good those beautiful traits. But we've gotten farther away from that. There's more of a selfishness element. There's more of a greed element. That whole team element has really diminished in front of our eyes. And it's just sort of smeared in our faces. Every time that we see a FanDuel commercial, we see a DraftKings commercial, and then we act shocked and surprised that somebody gets caught with a gambling scandal. Like, what did you expect? And now we're also thinking, well, you make multiple $1 million a year. Like Chauncey Billups, for example. Chauncey Billups has been a multimillionaire since I think he started playing basketball like around 96 or 97. So he's been a multimillionaire for a very, very, very long time. And now he continues that being a coach. He could have went into analyst on ESPN or something like that. So he's well paid. And you think to himself, why does somebody like that need to get greedier and get involved in gambling and some illegal mafia type dealing? Like why is that? It's just the power of greed. Like, people forget why they play the sport in the first place. For the love of the game, for the enjoyment, take advantage of the athletic abilities that God gave them, the coaching abilities that God gave them, and they got corrupted. We've gotten away from the family camaraderie element from sports, and now we're going to see, and this is my main point, we're going to see a lot more of this come into the future. If the mainstream media is going to be more cognizant and aware and give these stories the credit that it's due, I highly doubt that's going to happen to the scale that it needs to. But we'll start to realize that, man, there's a lot more of this going on than we thought. You think this Chauncey Billups thing is just this is the tip of the iceberg. Wait till we get some more true stuff about, LeBron and Steph Curry and guys that have been the face of the league. Wait till we finally get some credibility behind the fact that, Michael Jordan just randomly, quote unquote, started playing baseball for 2 years in the peak of his powers, and everyone just kind of bats an eye to that. Come on. Really? Yeah, we're going to see a lot more of that. It's a little bit bittersweet. It's bitter because the sports that we had a childlike admiration for when we were younger, that's going away, if not completely gone. But it's also sweet because you're going to get more elements of the truth, I feel, than at any point in modern history. I think it's a blessing that the mainstream media has been more and more fractured over recent years. It used to be you had to go to ESPN, you had to go to Fox Sports, you had to go to a major outlet to get your news, and they can manipulate it however they want to. Now we have, there's one benefit, and I think social media's got a lot of problems, so there's one benefit of being able to create your own YouTube and podcast and social media stream where you can get things that are closer to the truth. You can get some unbiased thoughts and opinions. I think there is benefit of that because you have all these entities that aren't tethered down to a specific home base like ESPN. You say you started working on ESPN and you want to be more of the truth and, you're not vibing or whatever, you can go and be independent, create your own podcast. You don't have to work for CBS or Fox or ESPN. So we're going to get more truth that way. But as always, difficult with the truth is you got to go digging for it. You got to look a little bit for it. And if you just turn on whatever mainstream channel it is, you're probably going to get something filtered out because it's sponsored by DraftKings and ESPN Bet and MGM. Yeah, but these are just my thoughts on that. I think this is going to be a domino effect. We're going to start digging more if you have any semblance of attention. We're going to start hearing more things about Shohei Ohtani and his shady interpreter. And I don't care how many home runs it hits. Like, there's going to be big stories coming out. We're going to hear more stories about NBA players. I think it'll eventually trickle into more prominent superstar level players. Not that Chauncey Billups wasn't a great player and a notable player in his time, but I'm talking about like the Steph Curry, Jokic, LeBron James level players. You're going to see some and hear some wild stuff coming out soon. I mean, hey, if it can happen to P. Diddy, in the entertainment and music world, why couldn't it happen in the sports world? So keep your eyes peeled for that. Again, Don't get too caught up in modern sports, these people being role models for your family and stuff, because like you can see the corruption out here. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, that was a little more true. And maybe it's just the fact that guys weren't making as much money. But now the money's gotten so astronomical that you really got to tamp down on instilling your family values from the Word of God and keeping it within the nuclear family. So that's just my thoughts on that. Peace out. God bless.